My name is Leonard Mudachi. Professionally, I'm a hospitality and restaurant professional. That's what I do for a living. I've done that since I graduated, so probably for the last almost 20 odd years. I have done this as an employee, I have done this as an entrepreneur, and I continue to do this to date. How I ended up in this as a career is I'm unique in the sense that I did not have a challenge of figuring out what I wanted to do. I always knew that I want to be in the space of hospitality, and that's how I ended up studying hotel and restaurant management, and worked a bit in the States, and then came back home and began my local career here. I started my career out with the Sarova Group as a restaurant manager. I had a short stint there. When I say short, about 6 months. And then I moved on to what I consider the formative years of my trade with the Tamarind Group at the flagship restaurant, The Carnival, where I was for a period of 6 years. After that, I ventured into an entrepreneurial space and I set up my own restaurant business, which was called Blanco's. Grew that to 3 outlets and lost it. I'll tell you more about that in a bit, what happened. And after Blanco's, 6 years of Blanco's, I felt that I had enjoyed my entrepreneurship experience, but also felt that I did not know enough about, I knew the operational side of the restaurant business, but I did not know sufficient, I did not have sufficient information about how, one, restaurants are funded, what investors into restaurants look for. And so I looked for a job that would enable me to learn those things. Interestingly, at the time, at the restaurant business, we had in Kenya, we had our first private equity transaction, large-scale private equity transaction, which was the acquisition of Nairobi Java House, which then became my second employer, or my third employer in the country. I joined Nairobi Java House as Business Development Director. My mandate was growth and strategy, and I had a brief to grow the brand out of Nairobi and also out of Kenya. So successfully did that. I did that for 8 months and then was promoted to Chief Operating Officer, and went back to entrepreneurship after 2 years with Java House, which is the space that I am in now. I am in the restaurant space, and what I do for a living is I build restaurant brands. So I look for areas that have high potential for growth in the restaurant space, and I build a brand around it and then go on to implement those brands in the market, the local market. So what can I tell you from a mentorship perspective about restaurants, or what it means to be an investor, or if you as an entrepreneur have a passion for the food and beverage industry and would like to is good, but is not enough. You need to, if you haven't done so technically, or you haven't done so in training, you need to learn about what are the technical aspects of running a restaurant, because cooking in a residential environment is very, very different to cooking commercially. And the mistake that many of us make is to assume that having good and tasty food is sufficient to give you a business in the food and beverage sector. There's a bit more you need to learn, and the first step would be to get that technical knowledge. How do you get that technical knowledge in a Kenyan context? I'll give that answer in 2 forms. 1, assuming that you're technically trained in the industry. 2, assuming that you're not. In the event that you are technically trained, my advice would be first to seek out people who have run businesses or restaurants that you admire that have been run commercially successfully, so that you can figure out or have conversations with the people who are running those restaurants and understand what it is that made them tick. How do they make money in the trade? if you are not a hospitality trained person, I would still advise you to seek out the people you like, particularly people who have run restaurants that you like. And this could be single unit restaurants, or this could be multi-unit restaurants, but seek and have that conversation. There's no knowledge that you will not be beneficial for you. Even sometimes the knowledge that you get is knowledge of what not to do. So have as many conversations as you can with the people who are in the trade, so that you can see what type of restaurant you want. One of the most critical decisions you would need to make as a restaurant operator or as an aspiring restaurant operator is, what type of restaurant do you want to run? One, do you want to run a restaurant that is going to serve food and food and drink, and it's going to be a 1-unit place that you run on your own for a period of time? Or do you have a vision of growing these into 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 into a chain of restaurants? Because how you set these two things up is very different. Let me share with you some of my personal experiences and some of the mistakes that I made. When I was leaving employment for the first time and I was going to set up my restaurant was called Blanco's Lounge and Grill, and it was a modern African restaurant. And the first mistake I made is I undercapitalized the business. And what that basically means is I raised way too little money. So I raised enough money to fit out the restaurant, to buy the furniture, to fit out the kitchen, to hire the staff. But my assumption was that the restaurant would be successful from the get-go. And even though we had a pretty decent concept, it was very new in the market and no one knew about it. So if I was to go back to 2006 when I was doing this, what would I do differently? What I would do differently is, one, if I had taken the time to understand how restaurant businesses are capitalized, and that's how do you raise money to run a restaurant successfully? I would have raised slightly more money. And what would I have raised money for? I would have raised money to keep the business going as the brand is forming itself in the market. What does that mean? You will start trading, let's say, month X. You're not necessarily going to have a full house. No one will know your brand. No one will know what you're offering. And it's going to take time for the market to get to know who you are. You hope and pray that time is as short as possible, but that's entirely up to the market. My advice would be, have at least 3 to 6 months. 3 would probably be acceptable, but have at least, if you can afford it, raise money to have at least 6 months buffer as you go into this space. What does that buffer cover? At least be able to cover your rent, be able to cover your staff salaries, and keep the doors open. If you cover those two critical things, which is your rent and your staff salaries, at least you're confident that you will be able to trade without closing your doors as your business forms. Second piece of advice is, this is a people business, and if you do not have the capacity to develop good relationship with people, it's going to be very tough to execute. It's a business where you're required to execute by having people execute on your behalf. What does that mean? Even if, let's assume you're a cook and you're a good cook, you're not going to cook, serve, wash dishes, and do everything else that goes within the restaurant operations. You'll need people to execute that for you. Now, this is something that is a challenge for many that come into this business, because we tend to look at the people from the perspective of, you have to be everywhere, I can't trust them, but you have to build with your own capacity an ability to develop a team that is able to execute the vision that you have for your business in a way that the people who interact with them would feel that they are interacting with you. That will require you to sell a vision to staff. That will require you to pay them right. That will require you to have them believe in what you believe in, that has made you want to invest in that business. 3, in university we were told something about the restaurant business. It's a quote that is attributed to Conrad Hilton, who is a career hotelier and the founder of the Hilton brand. And he says that the 3 most important things about a hospitality business, a location, location, location. And no one can emphasize, whether it's a hotel or a restaurant, location is going to be key. Understand what location factors drive the particular brand that you want to launch. And for conversation's sake, let's take a coffee shop. So you want to set up a coffee shop, and a coffee shop that serves tea, coffees, pastries. Now, coffee shops tend to be what we call in the business a high traffic business. So your location has to have high traffic footfall. Now, high traffic footfall in a Nairobi context would be maybe CBD, which basically all that high footfall traffic means is a location that has good foot traffic walking outside where it is, because that is a factor of success. Coffee and teas tend to be impulsive things. You meet a friend in town and you say, oh, let's dash in here for a coffee. So you want that kind of location. And I've seen many a concept fall apart because of poor location selection. You are unable to choose a good location for yourself, and even though your concept is good enough, it still does not work because the location is wrong. So find out as you're doing your groundwork, probably before you open, what are the factors that make the concept that you have in mind tick. So if I was to give you the example of the coffee shop, which is a high traffic location, let's move to the other side of the extreme, which is a fine dining restaurant. Fine dining tend to be higher in terms of spend, what you expect the customers to spend, but they also tend to be destination restaurants. And destination means that we go there for a special occasion, and as a result we have no problem traveling to get there. So location is now key, but different metrics that make those locations important. So the first location that I opened for a restaurant of my own was, if I was to rate it, A being great and F being pathetic, I would say it was a B- location. It wasn't the greatest location for what it is I was trying to achieve. But at the time, I did not know enough and I had not consulted enough to establish what it is that it would take. So I guess the benefit of me sharing this with you is you can probably take these initiatives before you actually go ahead and invest in your restaurant. So can't overemphasize the location bit, because you can get everything else right, but if you get the location bit wrong, you will struggle. Lastly, I would say, in a Kenyan context, what does the restaurant sector need? I think the restaurant sector needs more innovation. We tend to have a lot of blind imitation where we cut and paste concepts from other markets. So as you build and create your concept, also take the time to interact with the market. Who are your potential customers going to be? What do they want? You can be inspired by a concept maybe from the States or from a Western market or from another African market, but how do you localize this concept to make it locally relevant? That, I think, remains the thing that I think the youth of today can really tap into. Do your groundwork, talk to your potential customers. What is it that has made you see a concept from the West or from another market that you feel can work in this market? And then how can you localize that concept, making it more locally relevant without losing what attracted to you in the first place? I think there is way too much cut and paste, where our market is being asked to adapt to things that locally, consumption-wise, we are not really attuned to. So I think there's a huge opportunity for young people to actually step into this sector and make more of it. For example, let me give you one of the practical examples that I've observed. Take things that have become mainstream in terms of the youth and even the adults eating on the go. Yeah. So we have these guys who do smokies and who do eggs on the street. Who has thought of taking that concept and formalizing it to some extent? there is an opportunity right there to manage 5, 6, 7, 8 of this and take scale, which could help bring the costs down and build a thriving business out of it. When you go to big cities like New York and Paris, you always have a formal street vending culture of some kind, and smokies and eggs and KDF and one or two other things are what we have as Kenyans. Who's going to take that and build it into something interesting that is locally relevant and that we can use to grow our industry? Could be the next big thing. When you look at how we consume chicken or how we consume a whole host of other things, what can you take about this and bring formality into it and build a business that is sellable? Lastly, piece of advice, don't get too emotionally attached to whatever business it is that you want to sell. And when I say don't get too emotionally attached, don't get to a stage where you cannot look at your business objectively. Your business is there to give you a return, and it's there for you to invest in, and ultimately to pay you and to build you wealth. Yeah. So be very honest with yourself in your interrogation as your business, even after you have set it up, and don't be afraid to tweak and change until you get to a stage where your business is actually giving you that return. We are all emotional, and if we start a business, we tend to like to. It becomes, starting a business is like having a child. You become very, very emotionally attached to it. When I got married after when I got married when I was already an entrepreneur. I might not have gotten married or I might not have been an entrepreneur if I got married before that, because it is an emotional journey and it does take its toll. Lastly, I would say technical piece of advice: build yourself, get a support crew. Yeah, whether it's other entrepreneurs, whether it's siblings, but it's going to be an emotional journey for you, and you will need someone to talk to and someone to lean on. So build that. Look for people who understand entrepreneurship, or people who understand you as an individual, so that they can support you as you go through this journey of entrepreneurship, because it does get very, very lonely out there, and you'll not be mad if you find that the people who you lean on are not necessarily employed, because your employed friends may not necessarily understand what it is you're out to achieve. But have people who you can come and offload and say, listen, this is going really tough. This is the challenges I'm facing. What do you think about this, that, and the other? Have that safety net of your friends and colleagues to enable you to go through this journey. On a very positive note, I think as youth, you guys are living in a very exciting time. It's an exciting time to be Kenyan. There's a lot more options with regards to funding, with regards to people who can teach you about structure of businesses, fundamental structure. Take advantage of those groups, join them, learn, so that you can, the very fact that I'm sitting here making this video for you is indicative of how the market has evolved, and where you have multiple sources of information that can assist you to do better. This is our country. We are the ones who need to develop it. We are the ones who should be building the next corporate entities that will serve the countries for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So that is in your hands, and mine is to wish you all the very best. And that is all I have for you for today. Thank you very much.